We're here at the inaugural symposium of JIIA's Global Outreach Center, gathering rapid-fire insights from our panelists. About the US, which seems to be leaning further into an America First approach, how do you see the global role of the US evolving in the coming years?
Well, as one of your other professors said at this very interesting seminar we've had, however frustrated you might be with the current position of the United States, they are still indispensable. The relative share of GDP of the United States is still 25%. It actually hasn't declined in the last 25 years. Americans think it have, but it's not actually correct. The rise of China in terms of relative share has been at the expense of other countries, not the United States. But you'll never tell an American audience that and get them to believe it. So the point that we're saying is we still want to try and find a way to keep the United States engaged. First and foremost, on the security side, while I'm not a security guy, I'm a trade and economic and climate change person. At the end of the day, security is far more important than those issues. So, and I don't think there's any deep concern that the United States is walking away from the security guarantees they supply to East Asia, for example, Japan, Korea, and to other parts of the region. So, but the real challenge is on the economic side. And I don't think we've got solutions to this. That's what the symposium is about, trying to sketch out some ideas that might lead us to some, at least partial solutions.
Of course, we know that the US seems to be leaning further into an America First approach. How do you see the global role of the United States evolve in the coming years?
You know, it is certainly sad to see what the United States is doing to itself and to its allies and the international system today. India is not an alliance partner of the United States, so we are in some ways far removed from the US scheme of things. Unlike, say, Japan, you have a strong partnership with the United States. So I think what, in my opinion, is happening is that there is a sort of nativist urge within the Republican Party in the United States. There is a feeling that they are spending too much money on the international order, and they want to save all of that money and sort of spend that for domestic purposes. So there is a retrenchment that is underway in the United States. The moving out of the institutions on climate on the question of climate question and on various other, including on the nuclear question. There is a going back in the United States. Actions have consequences. And therefore, in the next 3 years, if there is no rethink in Washington, D.C., in the White House, under the Trump administration, these will have severe consequences. And I think it would be difficult to assume that while Donald Trump what he does, while the United States does what it does, the world is going to stay stagnant and wait for the storm to get over in Washington so things will go back to the good, happy days. That's not how international politics works. 3 years is a long time in geopolitics. So you may see a situation where the world will have radically transformed and changed by the time a new administration comes back. Even if it is a democratic administration in the United States, the world will have changed. So I'm in some ways worried about that.
We know that the US seems to be leaning further into an America First approach. How do you see the global role of the US evolve in the coming years?
I think first of all, we have to understand what is the America First approach. There's nothing unusual about any country putting itself first. In fact, that's the norm. Right, in international relations. What America First really means is the realization by, I think, the dominant elite now, which is not the traditional elite in the US, that after the end of the US-Soviet Cold War, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the US faces no existential threat anywhere in the world. China is a formidable competitor, but is it an existential threat to the US? I don't think so. Russia is certainly an existential threat to Ukraine and some of the smaller European countries. But to the US, I don't think so. So if you face no, and you can say the same thing about North Korea, Iran, it may be a threat in its immediate region and maybe even an existential threat, but not to the US. So if you are American, and you face no existential threats, or you have realized you face no existential threats, why should you, to quote John F. Kennedy, at the height of the Cold War, bear any burden, pay any price, fight any foe to uphold international order? Now, putting America first doesn't mean a retreat from the world. It means America has decided unilaterally, but that's not unusual. Unilateralism has always been a part of American foreign policy. But it has decided unilaterally to redefine the terms of its engagement with the world. It's going to be a much more transactional engagement. The American definition of interest has become narrower, and they are going to, and that is going to be the future, because this is a response to a structural change in the international system. No more Cold War. The US-China competition is much more complicated than the US-Soviet competition. It's a complex competition. It's not a binary competition. So I think we shouldn't look at America first as a retreat. It's a unilateral redefinition of how US is going to engage the world. And there is only one US, and that US is indispensable for many reasons. For example, in this region, there is no balance against China unless the US is part of it. So we'll have to get used to working with this new US. And I think our region, meaning East Asia, Northeast, Southeast Asia, has adapted pretty well, much better than Europeans, for a very simple reason. I think we have always dealt with America, and that includes US allies like Japan, much more on the basis of common interests rather than common values. And working on the basis of common interests fits a bit more neatly into the more transactional America that we are facing.
The US seems to be leaning further into an America First approach. How do you see the global role of the US evolve in the coming years?
Donald Trump has been focused on getting more equitable relationships out of our principal defense and security allies. We've seen in the second term already what he has achieved with regard to NATO, where the NATO alliance, European members have agreed to spend 5% on defense, 3.5% on hard security, 1.5% on infrastructure and the like by 2035 in exchange for a very strong guarantee of Article 5. And I think that's a model for how Donald Trump wants to deal with the rest of the world. We saw the news that the South Koreans have now agreed to spend 3.5% on defense. We've seen the Taiwanese government announce that it intends to reach 5% of defense spending in the not too distant future. And I think Trump wants to engage with allies and partners who really want to step up and take care of their own security. And I think once that's the case, the United States will be fully engaged. My sense on Donald Trump is he acts like a restrainer because he wants others to pick up the slack. But once others pick up the slack, he's delighted. He has an excellent working relationship with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, a superb working relationship with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and I think he's going to have a wonderful relationship with Prime Minister Takaichi as well.